Good morning, everyone. My name is David White. I work for the United States Department of the Interior Bureau of Reclamation. And this morning I'm going to be talking about two different things. My first presentation is about applying for federal funding using grants.gov. The second presentation will be on water conservation and other similar projects funded through the Bureau of Reclamation. So let's begin. Applying for federal funding using grants.gov. I'm not going to go through each slide, but my presentation is divided into three sections. The first is understanding the federal funding agency. The second is using grants.gov to search and apply for potential funding for your projects. The third are some tips for applicants, and we'll go over tips again at the end of my second presentation. The federal funding agency is important for you to understand which federal funding, which federal agency you're applying for, and what they want to fund. It's no surprise that through different fiscal years and different administrations, the priorities, policies, and missions of the federal agency may change. So a project that was competitive 2 or 3 fiscal years ago may not be competitive now, and vice versa. So by familiarizing yourself with that particular federal agency, you'll have a better idea of what they want to fund and a better idea of whether or not any of your projects would be competitive to receive funds from that particular funding agency. You can find such information through outward-facing social media, documents, websites, as well as through grants.gov and the information contained in particular funding opportunities. Grants.gov is a gigantic database used by many federal agencies to inform the public of funding opportunities that use taxpayer dollars. Grants.gov is here to help instill an open and fair competition process, as well as to leverage the expertise of the private sector in meeting the priorities of that particular funding agency. Not every funding agency uses grants.gov, and not every agency always uses grants.gov. But in general, many agencies use grants.gov, and they use it for the vast majority of their funding opportunities. Sometimes the funding opportunities back in the days were called FOAs, funding opportunity announcements. Now they're called NOFOs, notice of funding opportunities. Pretty much they're still the same. And when you get onto grants.gov, you'll see that there are 4 different categories for them. Forecasted are things coming down the pike. Posted are ones that are open. Closed are opportunities that have recently closed and archived, or opportunities that closed a substantial period of time ago, but you can still go into them and view them not only as historical documents, but also to give you an idea of what an agency may be looking for when it goes out for when it solicits proposals. Again, grants.gov is a gigantic database. There are a lot of built-in tips, tricks, as well as tools to use that you can use to help you find funding opportunities. There are even ways where you can sign up and for specific funding opportunities, and you will get notified via email about those particular funding opportunities. Searching is relatively straightforward. You just search for a grant, and there's many different ways of searching, not only as about the opportunity status that we talked about previously, but you can also do it by the instrument type, the eligibility, the agency. But can you do it by per state? No, you cannot. That is not an option. It has not been, and I don't at this time foresee it becoming an option. So unfortunately, you cannot search for all opportunities available in the state of California or Connecticut or wherever. But once you do search and you find something interesting, you can click on the opportunity number and it will have the application package within it. And that application package, which you can download or work in the cloud, will contain a lot of relevant information to help you understand not only the eligibility of an applicant, the eligibility of a project, but also the roles and responsibilities over the life term of the grant, the roles and responsibilities not only of the federal government, but also you as the recipient. The beginning of each NOFO has a synopsis that gives you kind of the nitty and the gritty of that particular NOFO, including who is eligible, the amount of words available, how long you have to complete the project. And as you go into the NOFO, you will see criteria. We try to be very transparent with you in what we're looking for. We ask questions. We ask you to use formulas. If we ask you a yes or no question, it's advisable that you begin your answer with a yes or no, and then you can clarify. If we ask you to use a particular formula, it's advisable for you to use that formula. If you don't feel like that formula best represents the benefits of your project or the extremities of your situation, you can use a different one and explain. But it is still advisable to answer yes or no to a yes or no question, as well as to use the formulas we give you. Once you complete a package, you can submit it, and then there are ways of tracking your application status and making sure that it was submitted. We don't prioritize a digital application over a paper application. Some people still send in paper applications, but there are a lot of forms to print out and send. And then the burden is upon you to make sure it arrives safely to whoever on our end is supposed to receive it. All right, so a few tips to keep in mind. It's important to register and submit early. Pay attention to timestamps. Sometimes we'll say midnight, but you need to know which time zone. Thoroughly read and follow all the instructions provided. Please fill out those standard forms, those SFs first. It's important to include enough program information and budget details that we have a good idea that you know what you're talking about and that it's also a reasonable project and it's something that you can deliver. If there are any optional forms, it's recommended that you complete those and submit those with your application. Please keep in mind your project is going to be evaluated based solely upon what is in the application. We are not allowed to do any outside research. If we have a question about your application, we can ask you that question, but it's going to be a very limited question. It's important for you to tell a compelling story about your project to ensure the application review committee understands why this project is important not only to you, but to the beneficiaries of the project. But keep in mind that we will take on face value whatever you say. So if we ask you a yes or no question, you answer it no, but later you provide enough information to support a yes, most likely we'll go with that no that you told us beforehand. So when in doubt, hedge your bets and let us say no. Because if you say no for us, then we're not going to really challenge that. So those are a few of the tips, and we'll talk a little bit more as I go to my next presentation. So